stop talking now. Attention. I told you, all of my critics, I told you all that I was the greatest of all time when I beat Sonny Liston. I told you today I'm still the greatest of all time. Never again defeat me. Never again say that I'm going to be defeated. Never again make me the underdog until I'm about 50 years old. Right. Then you might get me.
On June 3rd, 2016, Muhammad Ali, the three-time heavyweight champion of the world, Olympic gold medalist, and one of the most revered and electrifying figures in the history of American sports and culture, died in a Scottsdale, Arizona hospital. For decades, Ali had embodied greatness, not just for the way he fought in the ring, but for the way he lived outside of it, unflinching, poetic, and utterly original. He was brash and self-assured, a fighter who said he, quote, floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee in the ring, and who, in his prime, seemed invincible. He was also deeply principled. He risked everything when he refused recruitment into the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War, saying, quote, I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong. And for those words, he lost his heavyweight title, his boxing license, and nearly his freedom. But history would vindicate him, and the man born Cassius Marcellus Clay in Louisville, Kentucky, would emerge as Muhammad Ali, the people's champion. In the 1960s and 1970s, Ali's charisma extended far beyond the boxing ring. He wasn't just a sports star, he was a worldwide cultural phenomenon, a man whose image and voice reached into living rooms and classrooms around the world. He became a spokesman for both brands and causes, a face and a voice that sold sneakers, vitamins, and even record albums. His blend of confidence and compassion reshaped the template for what an athlete could be. Long before Michael Jordan or LeBron James built global brands, Muhammad Ali was a brand in and to himself, equal parts fighter, philosopher, and entertainer. By the 1980s, though, time and trauma had begun to take their toll. Years of punishing fights, including his legendary battles with Joe Frazier, George Foreman, and Ken Norton, left him with visible tremors and slurred speech. In 1984, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, a cruel affliction for a man whose wit had always been so quick. But Ali refused to retreat. He became a humanitarian, traveling the world to promote peace, goodwill, and understanding. By the time he lit the Olympic torch in Atlanta in 1996, Ali, alongside Michael Jordan, were the two most famous athletes in the world. Larger than any one nation or sport, Ali was a symbol of resilience and dignity. He was publicly lauded by politicians and dignitaries, but also traveled to impoverished inner cities and African refugee camps with little fanfare. He once said, quote, service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. And for as long as his body let him, he kept paying that rent in full. In the last decade of his life, Ali's health steadily declined. When he appeared at public events, frail, hands trembling, eyes focused but soft, the crowd always rose in reverence. Friends and family said that while his body was failing, his faith remained unshakable. He's still in there, his wife Lonnie said in 2013, and his soul is as big as ever. But by 2016, complications from his disease had grown severe. After a brief hospitalization for a respiratory infection, Ali was placed on life support. Surrounded by his family, his daughters, his son, and his wife, he slipped away. Muhammad Ali was 74 years old. I'm Jason Beckerman.
I'm Derek Kaufman.
This is Last Days, Muhammad Ali.
As news of Muhammad Ali's death broke, tributes poured in from around the world, from presidents and popes to boxers and movie stars. His passing wasn't just the loss of an athlete, but the loss of a cultural giant, a man whose defiance, charisma, and courage had transcended sport. Former heavyweight rival George Foreman said, quote, part of me slipped away, the greatest piece. Larry Holmes, another opponent turned admirer, called him, quote, the greatest man I ever met. Civil rights leaders compared his bravery to that of Martin Luther King Jr., while global icons like Nelson Mandela had long counted Ali as a personal hero. The global reaction underscored that Muhammad Ali had long since become more than the greatest in the ring. He was a living symbol of conviction and humanity. His funeral took place on June 10, 2016, in his hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, a city that came to a standstill to honor its most famous son. The ceremony began with an Islamic prayer service attended by thousands, reflecting Ali's deep Muslim faith. Days later, a massive public procession wound through Louisville's streets, passing landmarks from Ali's youth, from the house where he grew up to the gym where he first laced on boxing gloves. Tens of thousands lined the route, waving flowers and chanting his name as the hearse rolled slowly by. The memorial service that followed drew an extraordinary crowd, Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, former boxing champions including Sugar Ray Leonard, Mike Tyson, and Lennox Lewis, and religious leaders of all faiths were among the thousands of others who gathered under one roof. Bill Clinton, who first met Ali during his 1992 campaign and maintained a friendship through shared humanitarian work in the years that followed, said during the memorial service that, quote, "The real reason we all love Muhammad Ali is that he was a free man. He decided who he was, and he decided what his life would be." Actor Billy Crystal, who had long impersonated Ali in his comedy routines and then formed a late-life relationship with the champ, called him, quote, "the most perfect blend of power and poetry ever." And spiritual leaders from across faiths, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, and Buddhist, offered blessings, making it clear that Ali's influence had expanded far beyond the confines of the ring. Outside the arena, the atmosphere felt almost like a festival of remembrance. Fans brought handmade posters, boxing gloves, and flags. Some wore robes emblazoned with his image. Others simply bowed their heads. Around the world, candlelight vigils and televised tributes echoed the same theme, that Muhammad Ali had not just been a champion of boxing, but a champion of the human spirit.
This is not my original thought, but his life, Muhammad Ali's life, sort of really mirrored the period of 20th century America in which he came to fame. You know, it was so many struggles with race, religion, identity. Who are we as a country? Obviously, Vietnam is going on. His decisions, we'll talk about them later.
Civil rights movement.
The civil rights
This
movement.
was a period of upheaval in America, and he was at the epicenter of it on the right side of history.
On the right side of history, but at the time, and we'll talk about this more, he really went against, quote unquote, mainstream America. We're talking about white America at the time, right? He really said, I'm not going to play by your games. I'm not even going to say the right thing. I'm not going to say the nice thing. I'm going to say, I have no beef with the Viet Cong. I am not here to go and fight in your foreign wars. I am not here to stand by idly by while there's this sort of the remnants of Jim Crow still exist and we have unequal treatment in our schools and water fountains, especially he grew up in Louisville in the Deep South.
Sure.
You know, I'm not here to indulge these things, and just because I'm a great athlete and you guys want me to say these things, I'm not here to do it.
He was proud and defiant. He was undeniably also the greatest boxer ever. You can't lose sight of that.
The ladder,
and
you don't have the former.
that really helped him become this cultural icon. But it must be said that he wasn't the only boxer who stood out in American history. Joe Louis was before Muhammad Ali. You know, the way he stood out was his civic mindedness, his humanitarian efforts. That's the way he always sort of made a name for himself, his outspokenness. Sonny Liston, who was his greatest opponent in the early years of Ali, was very different, very willing to sort of placate to white America and sort of fit in.
So was Joe Frazier, and we'll talk about this more. That became sort of the root of their rivalry that went well beyond the boxing ring. They went to a real personal hate towards one another.
For the majority of their lives.
For the majority of their lives, they sort of reconciled towards the end. But nevertheless, and we'll talk about the things Ali said about Frazier.
Were absolutely vicious, and we should not whitewash them.
Right,
He was a really horrendous to him in many, many ways. But Muhammad Ali just sort of was a cultural icon unmatched in American sports history.
Yeah, the only person that might match it is Michael Jordan. Very different reasons.
Very
he was
different.
Much more commercial and didn't, as a matter of fact, famously did not take stands on political issues.
Classically, his famous issue is, I don't take stands because Republicans and Democrats buy shoes. And that couldn't be more opposite from what Muhammad Ali stood for in terms of principles.
Born Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. in Louisville, Kentucky in 1942, he grew up in the segregated South. Legend has it that, at 12 years old, after his bike was stolen, Clay told a police officer he wanted to whoop whoever took it. The officer, who trained young boxers, suggested he learn to fight. From that moment, the gym became a sanctuary. Under trainer Joe Martin, the boy's natural speed, agility, and confidence began to shape a style unlike anything boxing had ever seen. By 18, he was a Golden Gloves champion and an Olympic gold medalist, returning from the 1960 Rome Games a hero. There may be no better example of the right man at the right moment than Muhammad Ali's rise during the turbulent 1960s. In 1964, at just 22 years old, Cassius Clay shocked the world by defeating the fearsome Sonny Liston to become heavyweight champion. Liston was the monster of the day, the most intimidating fighter alive, and he was a 7-1 favorite over the upstart Clay. Yet, Clay danced around him, shouting, "You're my prey," and completely dominated the great champion, forcing the fight to be stopped after the 6th round.
I want to pause here on Sonny Liston for a second. I mean, that was, if you see that old footage, and it exists, and the photography around it beating Sonny Liston and standing over him.
That's fight 2.
Is the second fight. I'm stepping on your second fight. That's true. But he was so young and spry. His career had all of these different, sort of periods of it. But the young Cassius Clay with that incredible reach, unlike any boxer the world had ever seen.
I'm stepping on what we're going to say later, so let's get out of the way. Sonny Liston was the product of an old way of heavyweights fighting, not necessarily the lighter weights, but
a hulking bruiser.
Standing in the middle of the ring, strong as an ox, throwing punches with long arms, and then all of a sudden this kid comes along and starts dancing. I mean, those pictures of those videos of Muhammad Ali on his toes the entire fight, right, dancing, not giving anything to hit, and then obviously the most intelligent athlete of his generation, most intelligent athlete of any generation.
The footwork when he would dance the feet a little bit,
would wait, and then see his opponent begin to get tired of the exercise, and then he would strike.
And he combined it with a lot of power. He wasn't just a dancer. It was an incredible thing to behold.
At the time that Cassius Clay was coming of age, boxing, along with baseball, were far and away the most popular sports in America. The NFL was just barely entering the Super Bowl era, and it would be another decade before Magic and Larry and eventually Michael would save the NBA. So Clay's stunning defeat of Sonny Liston instantly launched him into the stratosphere of global fame. Just 12 days later, the world that was still getting to know the brash young champion was stunned again when he announced he was abandoning his birth name in favor of a new one, Muhammad Ali. About the change, Ali said, quote, "Cassius Clay is a slave name. I didn't choose it, and I don't want it. I am Muhammad Ali, a free name meaning beloved of God, and I insist people use it when they speak to me."
The act was viewed by many as defiant, and it was not well received in mainstream America. It risked his newfound popularity and made him a lightning rod in a nation already divided over race and religion. But all doubts about Ali's staying power were erased on May 25, 1965, when he faced Liston again in their rematch in Lewiston, Maine. Ali, brash and taunting as ever, knocked Liston out in the first round, producing one of the most iconic images in sports history. Ali standing over his fallen opponent, muscles taut, mouth open mid-taunt, demanding, "Get up and fight, sucker." The photograph crystallized everything he represented: swagger, grace, fury, and youth in a single immortal frame. Over the next 2 years, Ali defended his title 8 times against all comers, using his unmatched combination of size, speed, and intelligence to knock out a string of contenders. He was now widely considered the greatest heavyweight champion of all time, and it seemed like he was just getting started. But even at the height of his fame, Ali was first and foremost a man of deep conviction, and in March 1966, he refused induction into the army to fight in Vietnam. He was praised by civil rights leaders as a man of principle, but condemned by politicians as a traitor. Within a year, he was stripped of his heavyweight titles and his boxing license and banned from boxing for more than 3 years, the prime of his athletic life. Ali's anti-war agitation was widely condemned by the American media, and he was threatened with arrest for calling for mass resistance to the war effort. I want to pause here. Ali sort of refusing to fight in the Vietnam War stands in stark contrast to the generation of athletes before Ali. You're talking about all the guys in baseball. The 2 biggest sports were baseball and boxing. And all of those guys who gave up the primes of their career, Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio, they left to go serve in World War II and fight for America and fight for American interests and defeat Hitler. Stood in stark contrast, and that was still the American feeling about wars. Vietnam changed all that, but we look at Vietnam now through the lens of hindsight. Right. At the time, it was seen as another American war. There were falling dominoes, the communist menace after World War II. And so the amount of bravery it took for him to say, "I'm the most popular sports athlete, and I got no problem with the Viet Cong. I'm not going to go over there and fight," was enormous. It's staggering to even behold, because other star athletes of previous eras went and fought and served and were celebrated because of it.
It's remarkable. I don't even know if it happens again, right? He gave up millions and millions of dollars, worldwide fame. He was universally beloved. Now, but it was just something that he was just not going to do. And by the way, there would have been ways for Ali, as other rich people did, and he was rich at the time, to avoid going and fighting.
That's right. Quietly.
Yes. But he didn't want to do that. He wanted to.
Or as a superior athlete, maybe they would have,
right.
Whatever it was.
He wanted to make the point that I'm not going to fight in this war because it's unjust.
It was almost like he took all of his popularity and made all the decisions to sort of challenge whether he could remain popular with these things. The Nation of Islam, changing his name and so forth. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, others followed suit, but it was really Muhammad Ali was a level of fame who was the first and the biggest name to do it. But during this time of inactivity, public opposition to the Vietnam War grew, and Ali's stance eventually gained sympathy. Ali began speaking at colleges across the nation, proving himself to be an adept messenger of the anti-war cause. He advocated African-American pride and racial justice, but also racial and religious harmony.
Finally, in 1970, with public sentiment now firmly against the war in Vietnam, Ali was allowed to fight again, and he picked up right where he left off, dominating his first two opponents before getting his shot to reclaim his title against Joe Frazier. Ali taunted Frazier relentlessly, lording his unmatched intelligence and sharp tongue over Frazier, calling him ugly, ignorant, and Uncle Tom. The insults cut deep, wounding Frazier personally and permanently. Frazier responded the best way he could, by defeating Ali in 15 grueling rounds in what is still widely regarded as the greatest heavyweight fight in history. For a night, Frazier proved himself the superior fighter, and Ali was left to lick his wounds and consider his future. But two rematches would follow, the first in 1974, which Ali won narrowly, and then the legendary Thrilla in Manila in 1975. That third fight was less a boxing match than a test of human endurance. Under the sweltering Philippine heat, the two men battered each other nearly to death. Quote, "It was the closest thing to dying that I know," Ali later said. He won when Frazier's trainer stopped the fight before the 15th round, but Ali himself collapsed moments later, utterly spent. Time and distance would soften their feud. The two men eventually reconciled late in life, yet the scars of that rivalry endured. Athletically, Ali transformed boxing. No longer were heavyweight fighters brooding hulks who pummeled each other in the center of the ring. Ali danced and weaved as he encircled his opponents, using his unmatched instincts to decide when to pounce. His combined speed, grace, and psychology, taunting opponents with rhymes and riddles before dismantling them in the ring. No fight exemplifies Ali's greatness better than his 1974 fight against George Foreman, a mountain of a man who carried a 40-0 record into his 1974 battle with Ali in Kinshasa, Zaire, dubbed the Rumble in the Jungle. Foreman was a heavy favorite over Ali, who many people believed was not the same fighter after 3 years away from the ring. But in the months leading up to the fight, Ali showed that as brilliant as a boxer as he was, his true genius was outside the ring. He masterfully turned the narrative into a battle of good versus evil, portraying himself as a brilliant craftsman while casting Foreman as a menacing, unthinking destroyer.
See, I outthink a man. See, the matador beats the bull. The bull is the strongest. Bull hits the hardest, but the matador is the smartest. Be at the theater early, because this man I'm going to retire him. If you think I whoop Sonny Liston, you wait till I get George Foreman. He talks too much, he's ugly, he's pretending I'm the true champion, and they make me the underdog. I'm going to show them all they're wrong, because I'm the champion. I'm the real champion. There'll never be one like me.
When the fight began, Ali used his legendary rope-a-dope strategy to exhaust the younger champion before knocking him out. Ali's triumph wasn't just athletic, it was mythic. He became the first three-time heavyweight champion, and his legend was sealed forever. He would hold on to the title for another 10 fights, defeating legends like Ken Norton and Ernie Shavers along the way. But by the late 1970s, time and years of punishment had begun to exact their price. Ali's faith in himself still burned bright, but his body could no longer match it. He lost 3 of his final 4 bouts, each time hinting at retirement, only to return once more to the ring before finally stepping away for good in 1981. Yet somehow, Ali's mystique only deepened. As Bill Clinton would later say in his eulogy, a quarter century after the boxer's final fight, the second act of Muhammad Ali's life proved even more remarkable than the first. He became an ambassador for America abroad and a symbol of moral clarity at home. He starred in commercials, graced magazine covers, and delivered talk show performances that mixed humor with razor-sharp insight. Even those who once vilified him came to admire his unwavering sense of self. As journalist David Remnick wrote, he made dissent heroic. His conversion to mainstream Islam in the late 1970s, his peace missions in the Middle East, and his humanitarian work all cemented his transformation from rebel to revered elder statesman. The man who had once defied the U.S. government over the Vietnam War now channeled his convictions into peace missions and humanitarian work. He traveled to Lebanon, Iraq, Afghanistan, negotiating the release of hostages and advocating for understanding between faiths. His philanthropy, from feeding the poor to supporting Parkinson's research, reflected a deep empathy for human suffering. Over time, he became less a fighter in the literal sense and more of a symbol of reconciliation and resilience. He became revered by all parts of American society, even those who had once condemned him for his opposition to Vietnam or his unflinching civil rights crusades, now celebrated him as a moral titan, a man who had been right before the nation was ready to admit it.
So I just want to anecdotally talk about my grandmother for a second. This woman who helped raise me and sensational woman and one of my sort of heroes in life. But nevertheless, my parents were very far left of center. My grandmother was very far right of center. Mm-hmm. And she, was a Republican, pretty hardcore Republican for all of my life. and she saw the world in very stark terms. You were on the right side of things, you were on the wrong side of things. She loved Muhammad Ali and revered Muhammad Ali like no other athlete. You know, she wasn't a sports fan, but this man, she thought, and it was a respect for the principle. She obviously disagreed with his stance. She was pro-Vietnam War, the whole thing until the end.
But he was a man of his convictions.
But he was a man of his convictions. I remember her talking about him like there's a man who stands behind what he believes, come hell or high water. And that was what he accomplished that I don't know if there's anybody else I can think of who you disagree with, but you really admire the man.
Yeah, I grew up, admiring Muhammad Ali. He was already retired by the time basically I was born in 1980. But I had a really conflicted period in thinking about him for a time because I was a big Joe Frazier guy. And I really loved sort of what Joe Frazier represented. I love the movie Rocky. He was much more of a hard scrabble puncher rather than a tactician like Ali, who was so brilliant. Rocky was the palooka in the ring, and Ali was
let me interrupt you for
Apollo
a second,
Creed.
because I think what you're getting at is that Ali, I know you respect and admire him quite a bit, but you don't seem to forgive him for what he did to Joe Frazier.
Yeah, I've read a lot about him, and I've seen a lot of documentaries about him and Frazier. And Frazier really he did forgive him in a manner of speaking, but he held on to that resentment over the vicious things that Ali said.
In fairness to Frazier's position, he forgave him when Ali was a very sick man.
Yes,
it wasn't like during their life they had a reconciliation.
Not at all. And to the contrary, he had a voicemail message that always sticks out with me. That he said, like, he was mocking Muhammad Ali. If you called his cell phone before you left a message, it would say something like "float like a butterfly, sting like a bee," and like, "but I inflicted more damage than him." Yeah. And look at the results. Sort of mocking what Muhammad Ali had become with Parkinson's, the sort of shakiness at the Atlanta games and so forth. And Joe Frazier didn't have that same decline. So I wrestled with it, but he had such a long period of being this global ambassador of philanthropy and humanitarianism that it was impossible to not admire someone like Muhammad Ali in the sort of grand arc of history. And when he lit the Olympic torch at those 1996 Atlanta Games, his hand trembling from Parkinson's, people no longer saw that brash young man who had shouted, "I'm the greatest," but an elder statesman who had suffered and endured. The moment transcended sports. It was an act of grace, a visual testament to courage and decline. In his final years, Ali's voice grew quieter, but his presence never dimmed. When he died in 2016 at the age of 74, the mourning stretched around the world, and the praise for him transcended race and politics. Barack Obama talked about his reverence for Ali, saying the champ shook up the world, and the world is better for it. We are all better for it. And Donald Trump, no less, called him, quote, "a truly great champion and a wonderful guy who will be missed by all."
In many ways, Muhammad Ali redefined what it meant to be a modern athlete, one who could use his fame as a platform for conscience. Beyond politics, his influence coursed through pop culture. Musicians quoted his rhymes, comedians mimicked his braggadocio, and advertisers built campaigns around his confidence and charm. In the years since his death, Muhammad Ali's presence has remained indelible. He has been memorialized in film, song, literature, and art. The nickname he gave himself, the greatest, now feels less boast than prophecy. From the stolen bicycle that first lit his fire to the roar of crowds that once echoed his name, Ali's journey remains one of the most dramatic and transformative stories in modern history. Of all the statesmen and luminaries who came to know Muhammad Ali, two stand apart as true friends and confidants. The first was Nelson Mandela, whom Ali met numerous times after Mandela's release from prison, a friendship that endured until Mandela's death a few years before Ali's own. The second was Bill Clinton, who, despite their vastly different upbringings and life paths, formed with Ali a rare bond of friendship and mutual respect that spanned the final 2 decades of Ali's life. It was only fitting, then, to give the former president the final word, as he eulogized the man he always simply called the champ.
After all the years that we had been friends, my enduring image of him is like a little reel in 3 shots. The boxer I thrilled to as a boy, the man I watched take the last steps to light the Olympic flame when I was president. And then this, the children whose lives he touched, the young people he inspired. It's the most important thing of all. So I ask you to remember that. We all have an Ali story. It's the gifts we all have that should be most honored today.